And we're live. Hey guys, this is Jay Campbell with the TRT Revolution podcast, and I am incredibly excited and humbled and honored to be joined by two amazing authors with me today in studio. Gerald Clark, who is the prolific author of the Anunnaki of Nibiru and also the Seventh Planet Mercury Rising, which is his most recent book. Gerald is a prolific writer and blogger, and he also has an awesome YouTube channel, Seventh Planet Broadcasting. He's with us today. And then I'm also joined by Matthew LaCroix, who is the author of an amazing book that I recently finished called The Illusion of Us, The Suppression and Evolution of Human Consciousness. Both of these guys are absolute masters of understanding what's really going on in our world. You know, call them truth seekers deluxe. And again, I'm incredibly excited to have them with me today. Guys, how are you doing today?
Doing awesome, Jay. Thanks for having us on the show. And I look forward to doing a couple more with you, too. We got more to talk about.
For sure, man. I'm so excited. Matt, how are you doing, brother?
Awesome. Thanks for having me tonight.
Awesome, man. Well, let's get right into it, guys. So, you know, for the listening audience out there, we have so much to cover that we all kind of decided that we're going to do a couple of podcasts. This may be two, this may be three, who knows? But we're going to try to break it up in a way that makes it seamless and flow. So I'm just going to jump right in, guys. I'm going to try to narrate and kind of go back and forth between Gerald and Matt as they discuss their opinions about their books and how it relates to what's going on in the world today. So anyway, just to jump in there right now, I'll start with Gerald. Gerald, obviously your books are amazing. You know, the Anunnaki of Nibiru, I read a couple of years ago, mind-blowing book. And then your most recent book, The Seventh Planet, the Mercury Rising, again, picked up right where you left off. Tell us a little bit about the Anunnaki, you know, the players, the history. I mean, again, our audience knows the Anunnaki. I mean, most of these guys have read Slave Species of the Gods. They're familiar with Zechariah. But, you know, give us a quick, you know, high-level summary.
Okay, buddy. Well, the Anunnaki have been written about in massive quantities throughout the ages, and in particular, recently, people are rediscovering them because of the affiliation with the concept of a planet X or a 10th planet or Nibiru. Okay, so they probably started with the idea of this planetary concern in 1976, which led to some people finding out about the 12th planet. Well, on this 12th planet, which is mentioned in the Enuma Elish, which is the Babylonian epic of creation, it describes an intruder planet that gets caught into our solar system for whatever reason, probably because it was part of another binary star, and maybe the foci length changed due to some gravitational changes in the allegory of the battle of the planets. And that's how they actually treated this cosmology story, as an allegory of a battle of planets colliding with each other. So, fast forwarding, they have a planet in retrograde orbit around our sun. Comes around, according to them, every 3,600 years, which is a shar. And we're overdue. We're overdue for its return. And we believe the last passage, at least my numbers show, is that between 1585 and 1600 BC, right about the time of the biblical Exodus. So the idea of the plagues of Egypt possibly being caused by an external force like what we're describing here, red iron oxide that can turn the water, all that. So fast forwarding, it looks like it's due back, and the entire YouTube community seems to be focused on the fear of this thing coming back. Well, let's talk about the beings that supposedly had something to do with that planet. Well, in the Sumerian writings, and I particularly focused on writings from the University of Oxford, primarily because there was so much controversy over, is anybody interpreting them correctly, or anybody maybe misinterprets one word, well, they got to be cut at the root with an axe because they're a false prophet, or just whatever, right? I mean, it's really been crazy what's happened with the Sumerian story. But in that story, it tells us these beings came here to get resources to protect their atmosphere. They had a long series of Earth Chronicle events here with lots of different civilizations. Fast forwarding to the main events in the Bible that people connect with. If you connect the players of the Anunnaki with that, they seem to get it. So let's do that. Let's do that real quick. So Atrahasis is another document that I relied on, including so I mentioned three of them all the time. Yeah, there's thousands of them. Okay,
right.
These three, just to simplify the whole story for people: the Atrahasis, the Enuma Elish, and the Epic of Gilgamesh. If you just look at those three, it lays out the main players. So who are the main players? on this Anunnaki council that seemed to be running things, okay? There was the father, Anu, the highest rank. His number is 60, a sexagesimal number. They based their math on sexagesimal, okay? So he had the highest number, base 60. He was it.
Right.
He was on Nibiru, came back and forth to Earth many times, and he's in the records, and actually having a white temple of Anu in the city of Uruk where Gilgamesh was the king. So we have physical evidence to correspond with what they said, okay? His wife is Antu. She never gets mentioned very much, but she's a significant player in the Egyptian story of Geb and Nut. Well, this is Anu and Antu.
Right.
All right, so they're both back on Nibiru. About 450,000 years ago, Enki was sent to the Earth after an exile was escaped here, and his name was Lalu. I won't go into that story too much. It's a little too much detail. Enki's a scientist. He's here to get resources to help their planet, part of which is monoatomic or alluvial gold, whichever he could get, because they could ionize this and put it in the atmosphere and shield their radiation when they came in close perihelion with the sun. That's you know, and imagine doing that a bunch of times and it getting knocked out of your atmosphere. It's not going to last forever. Right. So they had to keep doing that. So this is not a long-term solution that you can do forever just by looking at that.
So would you say they had technology to be able to scope the universe from where they were going and knew that the Earth was full of gold and alluvial gold and minerals?
Absolutely. Well, listen, since they were going in the opposite direction of the rest of the planets, guess what that allows you to do? That means you get to see everybody when you cross them.
Right.
So, and that's also a danger in that you could have a collision with them, much as they described in the Ilish. Okay.
So what would you say the Anunnaki technology is? How far advanced? Obviously 450,000 years ago, but in comparison to us now, where are they in like the interplanetary, you know, in the Kardashian scale of systems? Where are they?
Well, they're not even on our playing field. Okay. They're manipulating us like pretty much unconscious pawns from the game they're playing. So their technology is way beyond anything that we have. I mean, think about holographic telepresence. Okay.
Right.
Think about the power of their mind, which they're described in the Emerald Tablets. Some of them have the ability to manifest matter anytime they want.
Right.
And change any shape they want. So they're from a higher dimension than we are, and they know rules that we don't know in terms of how to play in the material world. So it's not even a real game. I mean, we're the ones that are just completely unaware of the extent to which they have us mind controlled through frequency, through the illusion of light. Now we even have cloaking technology for the military. Well, imagine that they've had this all along. Yeah.
So talk about that, and Matt, jump in here in a second here. Jerry, amazing summary of all of that. And again, you know, this is a high level audience for the people that are going to be watching us. So we're trying today. The goal of this show today is to really cover stuff that hasn't been covered. Okay. So we're going to save some time, you know, whether it's at the end or another podcast after this in succession, or we're going to answer questions because we have a lot of really good questions. So Matt, jump in here. Jerry just mentioned that this is a higher dimensional being. So, you know, elaborate a little bit about that as far as the higher dimensional aspect of the Anunnaki.
So from everything we can tell, the Anunnaki are humanoids. That's how they were able to work with our DNA, because we're on a similar capacity. And so if you think of them as just the fact that they came here 450,000 years ago, and they were already, you know, possibly more than 1 million years more advanced than we are, like Gerald mentioned, we're just like these little ants on this little planet that they're just kind of monitoring right now from above or from wherever they want to go. And you know, everything we've seen, one of the most common things that people say is, if there's extraterrestrials all over the place, how come you don't see them? How come they don't visit here? And the idea is that this barbaric community prison planet we live on has been turned into such a dark place that I think we're literally quarantined off from anyone coming here until we actually grow up. So these beings that I guess are our parents, basically, if you think of them on the highest level, they are kind of fighting between themselves on which side of the timeline we should travel towards, you know. And so it's kind of shocking to wake up and realize that you're part of that. It's not like you're reading about this on another planet somewhere. You know, we're realizing this about our own selves right now, that these higher Lord Masters are are have kind of been manipulating our reality for thousands of years.
So Jerry, great comment, Matt. So, so question for you, Jerry, because I know we get this a lot in the alternative community. I see this a lot. So explain, so people have a good understanding of this. Explain where human beings, obviously not sapiens, but whatever, Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, Denovians, where were we in our state before the Anunnaki tweaked our DNA or put the clamp on us, as you like?
Okay. All right, buddy. Well, let's start with what we know about our genetics. There were 2 studies done that kind of tried to find out the genetic Eve and the genetic Adam, which was very telling. Okay. It took us back to using mitochondrial DNA and the Y chromosome degradation. They looked at these 2 methods, and they both landed us in the southeast part of Africa,
right,
approximately 160 to 220,000 years ago.
Right.
Okay,
so that's the mitochondrial Eve.
You're right. So that in that time frame, there were several bipedal hominids around. The 2 primary groups were Neanderthal and the Cro-Magnon, which were practically wiped out by that time. I think.
Right.
So we know the Denisovians were around 400,000 years ago. They were still considered Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon. I have to go back and look. But those groups were around, so there were bipedal hominids running the steppes of Africa at the time that the gold mines in South Africa were discovered, which are in the same area. Oh, by the way, when I first started this work in 2004, when I first started writing my book, the Anglo-American Mining Corporation owned all the mines in South Africa, and there are thousands of them.
Right.
Well, guess what now? I just went and researched them. They must realize people are onto them. They've jettisoned all their gold holdings and hidden it under some other shell game. I think it's with the Viking Mining Corporation. I'm not sure. Wow. But they were the ones who had actually carbon dated the mines in South Africa and made me ask the question in 2004 or so, who in the hell was mining gold in South Africa 100,000 years ago? And then you combine that with the genetic Eve and genetic Adam study, and it takes you right back to the story. What the Sumerians are saying is that they genetically modified one of the bipedal hominids from the steppes of Africa to replace their Gigi miners. Period. It's in writing in the first tablet of the Atrahasis, who, by the way, was another name for Noah. Okay, so yeah. Right. So hopefully that brings us forward to where we can start talking about the new stuff, you know?
Yeah. So let's, before we get into the new stuff, let's talk a little bit about the human antenna, Jerry. You're really, really big on that. You know, obviously, you know, tell people who don't know you a little bit about your background, you know, before you got into the alternative research community, so that they understand why you are so qualified to talk about this at this level.
Okay, well, probably a lot of people don't know about me, but I spent 7 years in the Army flying attack helicopters, and the whole time I was living my dream. I had a dream of flying ever since I was a kid. But I found out something about myself is I wanted to know everything about the aircraft. I just had an engineer's temperament, right? I wanted to know everything about the electrical system, all about the avionics, everything. And it turns out when I got back to San Diego in '89, I went back to college at the same place I started at before I went to the military, which was UCSD at Revelle College. And I was interested in electrical engineering, and that's what I spent most of my career doing, and designing hardware and circuits and systems and communications and broadcast and radio, just about anything that has to do with putting a carrier wave modulated with data. I did it. That's awesome. That includes up and down with satellites, with the Global Star constellation. Sure. And so we thought we were done then, and then I ended up running a team where we actually introduced the very first HD encoders, MPEG encoders to ABC, and this was about circa 1996. So my little team got credit for digitizing American television and introducing the first HD codec at 1080i and 720p through ABC.
That's awesome.
So we did that, and I thought it was done. I thought it was done then, and then I ended up in this really crazy space that kind of intersects with the Emerald tablets, and that was a VP of engineering in free space optics, where light was being modulated through transceivers through the air to replace optical fiber. I learned so much about the nature of light and properties of light that really satisfied my physics interest in that space.
So at that point, were you then, I would assume you were traveling around the world in this role, and so that migrated you into the whole study of Egypt and the ancient texts, or how did you get from there to there?
Well, I think where I got to was we had a real problem in the telecom market in about 2002. There was a meltdown, and our investors. I did startup companies, so we were always dealing with investors, right? Our investors told us it was time to take a little hiatus until things smoothed out.
Right.
And I felt like I'd been exposed to so many things traveling around the world that I really didn't have a chance to see anything except the inside of a taxi, a hotel room, and the airport.
Right.
And I wanted to find out about some of the stuff, especially when I was traveling back and forth to Turkey. I realized there was some really ancient stuff there that violated what I understood about history. And that actually got me started looking into some things so that I wasn't an ugly American. I could go talk to my Turkish customers and go, I know a little bit about your culture. You clearly know there's nothing in our culture worth knowing about.
Right.
Not anymore. It used to be the land of the free, the home of the brave. I don't even want to claim the place anymore with what's going on.
Right.
So anyway, so I dug into history, found out about who these gods were, the Hittites, who they were to the Muslim-speaking people, to who Allah was. Well, I found out who Allah was. I found out who they all were. They all map back to the Anunnaki, and I put that in my book. So,
sure. Matt, you want to jump in there? Anything you want to add about what Jerry just said? I mean, obviously, Jerry. I think it speaks to the level. There's no one really like you in the alternative research community that has your academic background. The integrated circuits, all these things that you have done. And actually translates, in my opinion at least, and translates into your writing. So Matt, obviously you're very familiar with Jerry's works too. Anything you want to add about that? I want to get into the whole human antenna here in a second, but anything you want to add, Matt?
So one of the things that I have for my book is that the cover I shows two colors of red and blue. And Gerald was just talking about how when he got looking into light, it kind of really satisfied kind of a lot of questions, because I feel like once you understand the properties of light and what we are as a human antenna, it kind of opens up doors that lead everywhere, because everything comes down simply to our basic vibration. And so if you look at light as being different wavelengths of vibration, you can start to see that if a certain being belongs in a certain vibratory rate, if that being is taken out of that state, they can be controlled through mind control. And if human beings, if we are simply just antennas that take in information, and if our antenna is not functioning in a certain vibration it needs to, in this case it would be a blue vibration, because that's where human beings would fall into. If we weren't in that state, we would literally be like slaves of our mind, because we wouldn't have control of what we think we do. And so it's fascinating to realize that if we look at the various states of human consciousness across a lot of the populations of the planet, and all the things that are emitted from electronics and all the television through controlling through fear, everything is geared towards keeping people in the slowest, lowest frequency they can, and so that they can essentially dumb the population down, so they'll never have any conscious ability at all.
So Jerry, good point, Matt. So Jerry, just talk, very briefly about the chakras. So,
okay. Well, let's talk about energy and matter to start with.
Sure.
And I just kind of laid out my background that electrical engineers oftentimes deal with the unseen. I mean, actually, we would deal with that more than we do with the seen. Okay, if you're an antenna designer or whatever. Well, I want to approach us from the standpoint, and I wrote this paper called "Structure as Function as Energy" when I was graduating from my training as a structural integrator back in 2004. And I think that was the first time I really started to apply the rules of physics to myself, and this will lead right into my idea about a human antenna. Actually, I call us a meat modem. I graduated from the antenna to realizing there was a transmit and a receive function. So we're meat modems, okay?
I don't think you went more than 3 pages in your notes without saying meat modem, but yeah, keep going.
Yeah. So anyway, so from an energy and matter standpoint, and I have to say that Matt's definitely right that light is the most unmanifested energy, and it can be across multiple wavelengths, which wavelength and frequency are related by the speed of light. The speed of light equals wavelength times frequency. Okay, so pick any spot on the electromagnetic spectrum. There's a frequency there. You can come up with the wavelength of light, or whatever wavelength it is. It doesn't have to be visible light, because light to us is 400 to 700 nanometers that creates visible spectrum. Well, that's a very small
Yeah.
That's 300 nanometers of wavelength that we get to see the whole freaking spectrum of. It's like we had these little donkey goggles on,
Yeah,
going through the simulator, and that's all you get to see is that little field of view. Well, that's the truth, and that goes for your other senses too. So
Sure.
the idea that you are seeing what's really out there in the world, not even close.
Right.
The idea you think that it's being projected out there like a movie screen inside your mind. No, you're perceiving what's out there and you're creating it from your brain.
Right.
Okay, so from an energy and matter standpoint, we know that the human body is susceptible to certain frequencies. And we talked about brain waves. Okay, they range from delta, theta, alpha, beta, from about a half a hertz up to anywhere from 20 to 60 hertz, depending on whose literature you're reading. Okay.
Right.
Well, if that's the case, then you can think about, okay, well, what if I had a little transmitter that could send something in that brainwave region, and the amplitude of the signal that I'm sending in is higher than the one that your brain's generating, which is very small, by the way. If this signal is higher than that one, if they're at the same frequency, the one with the higher amplitude, same frequency, is going to win. So if anybody just wanted to figure out how the brain worked, could read a brainwave and then put in that same pattern, they could put an image, a thought, anything into your mind, especially if they have the ability to
Exactly.
well, so they'll think about this. We've been able to record and interpret brainwaves since the early 60s. Okay, so this is nothing new, nothing new. So imagine you recorded somebody for 24 hours, every thought, every emotion they had, and at the just right time, that you wanted to project that to them and trigger that same emotive state in the being, you could do that just by taking what you've recorded in their frequency as an image or a spectral signature of them and play it back to them over the same frequency, right? So, and there's lots of ways to do that, whether it's through entrainment, all the different methods of messing with the human body. And that includes the more primitive functions too, like we have a reptilian organ, which is a pineal gland that in a reptile acts like a third eye that regulates the melanin in the skin, okay? So that they can absorb heat or reject it, right? Well, all of these organs that have interfaces with the electromagnetic spectrum at various levels can be affected, okay? So I believe that because of that, it's pretty clear to me if you look at the human structure, and I'm talking about the structure of the bones, just the arrangement. Right. Looking at a central conductor running through your spine with ribbed fins sticking out on it with a pelvis that looks like a cavity resonator with some very, very strange holes in it. If you really look at a human pelvis, you're like, are those for creating holes and zeros on a Bodhi plot? Okay. Dude, so the human antenna has really never been analyzed from that standpoint, at least in the open domain, okay? But the receiving part to me is pretty clear. The real issue is if you can generate a brainwave, is your perception of what you're seeing in the world through your five senses, guess what? You're transmitting. You're transmitting. So a brainwave signal is an electric signal that can be detected on an electroencephalograph, right? Well, if you can detect that electrical signal in close range and you have a really strong amplifier, you can detect it at a long range. I mean, even from satellite, okay?
Right. So what you're essentially saying is, the big picture here is that the Anunnaki literally tuned us. They literally left us, from like a pitchfork Pavlovian state to literally be able to make sure that we were following the party line, whatever their party line has to be.
Well, we're very, listen, in the general sense, we are biometric avatars that they've placed on a remote planet as part of their civilizing and resource gathering mission. Think of yourself as a remote space helper that gets dropped down. Everything that you see, touch, smell, transmit in your brainwave, they can monitor it. You're like a Mars rover, okay?
Right. Right.
Exactly. Right. So and functionally, each of us being put into different roles all through the planet. We're more than just rovers. I mean, we're factory workers, and we're doing, farmers and technicians and scientists and all the other functional avatar roles that we have as different programs. So this is where it kind of crosses over with the Matrix, is you are a meat modem that's in a simulator. And that's what I want people to finally wake up and realize, because the simulation is created in the hologram from light. Light creates all matter, as Matt was stating. And if you get deep into physics, all physics people understand this as well. Maybe the lay population doesn't, but everything is frequency, and matter is the transient part that comes and goes in this equation, E equals mc squared. So this equation from Einstein really relates energy and matter. And then the speed of light just so happens to be in there as a scalar, right? It never changes. So it's all about this relationship of how much energy it takes to create matter, and when you destroy matter, how much energy it creates, right? This is your nuclear bombs. So, but I never applied those kind of rules to myself when I came up with my equation 5a to describe the human antenna. So what do we know? We have nerve ganglia up and down the spine.
Right.
Some people say minimally 7. Some people say we have as many as 13, depending on where you measure. There's a direct correlation between those nerve ganglia functioning and the endocrine system organ that goes with it. Okay, so the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, the thymus gland, all the glands that go with that system are affected by that system. The energy and those organs have to work into conjunction. So if your energy's bad, those organs are going to be bad. Okay, in general, they're not going to function to their optimal. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about that, later when we talk about the endocrine system for sure. But you're right. I mean, right now people are dealing with like the whole insulin resistance, metabolic disorder, and you're right. When it's done, your energy is not transferring.
That's right. So in general, the Hindu and the Indian belief about a chakra system is that we have nerve ganglia, little bundles of nerves up and down the spine that both send and receive to parts of the body that also seem to be focus points where the energy along our central conductor, our spine, expresses itself in different wavelengths. And it just so happens those wavelengths are known, which are the color of the rainbow, which is really a trip. When I found that out, I was like, what? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, right up. So those wavelengths, and they knew this back in the chakra system in ancient India. So how the hell did they know that without some sort of imaging system or some measurement? Anyway, that being said, I wrote an equation to sum up that energy, take into account the fact that we don't talk about E equals MC squared for a human. We talk about weight and gravity and wavelength and frequency. Those are the only 4 we need, okay?
That's right.
So if you have those 4, you can kind of come up with an equation that says, well, how much energy should a human have if all this is working? Okay, and that's what I did with my equation. So we have a place to measure now, whether it's with a numeric system or with an imaging system, so you can see it by color. And that's what people generally would prefer. But I used to measure it numerically, translate the frequency into wavelength, and plot it on the software that I had in part of my practice.
So Jerry, what is the percentage of people globally that are completely out of balance?
More than 95%, I'd say.
95%.
If people are not connecting to their internal energy such that what they eat makes them feel a certain way, so they go, oh, I'll never eat that again. If they don't even have that level of distinction, it's hard to. So there's some. How many of those do you know? You know so many, and I do too. So if you don't pay attention to how food makes you feel, then you're not going to pay attention to the subtle differences in how the difference in your mindset when you're meditating versus when you're running in beta state at near 20 hertz, ADD in culture. Listen, we're not designed to run at that frequency. We're designed to be at the frequency that's prevalent at the surface of the Earth, which is about 7.8 hertz, and that's the Schumann frequency. You want to go deeper in the Earth, you get a different frequency, but on the surface, it's 7.8. Why aren't we in that brainwave state? We know the alpha state is a very heightened learning state, right? So something has happened such that humans can't even be at the frequency that's being generated at the surface of the cylindrical sphere, our Earth, our standing wave frequency. We can't even tune to it. So that's for most people, and you got to find out why. And I think you and I and Matt are all have a piece of why that's happening. Wow.
So flash forward to now, with that understanding, as Jerry just eloquently explained, Matt. I mean, what if the Anunnaki are tuning us and doing all this, and all these people, 95% of the Earth is out of balance? What is their goal right now? What is their end game? Talk about maybe the transhumanism movement. This whole AI, the melding. I mean, what is the big picture goal?
So yeah, like Gerald just mentioned, the Earth, it seems, has been locked in, from whatever various means they've done, has been locked in this various vibrational frequency that does not match a human being, specifically to control us, so that, like you were saying, if we're not in our alpha state, if we're in this dumbed down, like I call it a red consciousness state, because you're stuck in a vibratory frequency state that you don't belong in. So therefore, you're not functioning on any of the brainwave levels. You may not even be able to absorb information the same way you think you will be able to. So these various states that we're controlled in are to basically prevent everything that we're talking about right now from getting out to the general population.
So then why are the three of us, Jerry, answer this. And there's obviously thousands of people, men and women like us, why are we able to be quote unquote seekers and balanced and outside of this frequency that we're able to share this kind of intel?
Well, I think it's an individual case-by-case basis. Seekers generally will become finders if they don't give up.
Right.
The problem is they've made seeking very, very difficult.
Right, because you got to pay, you got to have money, you got to live in the rat race.
The suppression, the great suppression.
Yeah, well, actually, yeah. So I think what really woke me up was structural integration and exposure to the Sumerian story. That really, and especially, I have to say, the structural integration took away the rigidness of my mind, that it was caused by the rigidness of my body.
So Jerry, the same thing for me. I mean, I started seeing a chiropractor, same thing, deep tissue, Rolfer, still see my Rolfer. We see him twice a month. He does fascial stretching too. I mean, the guy's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, and then balancing my hormones. So I have the same story as you.
Well, so our story is you change the energetic state of the body.
Yes.
And deal with that as if it's your temple, and guess what? You start dealing with what's taking your energy higher or lower, because you never even knew that before, did you?
Not even a clue.
See, that's the thing. What you don't know is what's got you by the back of the neck.
That's right.
You cannot,
Incredible.
let Matt talk to that, because you're an expert on consciousness. Explain to people how it is they even come to the awareness of that, what's got you by the back of the neck, unless you... and then tell us how you came to this place as well. I think
Sure.
Jay and I came the same way.
Yeah, sure, Matt, go ahead.
Okay, so I was somebody who bits and pieces came to me where I was always very open to things, but it was kind of like a bomb dropped on me, because like Gerald was mentioning, the Sumerian writings basically captured him. But for me, it was something. For me, what really grabbed me of all was the Dogon story. When I was starting to look into the Dogon story, and of course, if anybody doesn't know the Dogon story, I'll give it a high level. In Western Africa in the 1930s, some French basically explorers went down there and they found this remote tribe of people called the Dogon, who had all this vast knowledge of the Sirius star constellation system of A, B, and C. And it turns out that, and they had vast amounts of knowledge that, about how the orbits were and about all the stars. This is a primitive tribe, and so it turns out that the Sirius B can't even be seen without a telescope.
Right.
They knew everything about it, and then of course Sirius C we haven't even found yet. So to make a long story short, there are these moments where this one piece of information that had been protected can lead to everything else, every other outcome, because it put me on a path. And so that path that started there then worked its way up to realizing, okay, here is this fundamental truth to these colors of red and blue, and how we are all controlled through our vibratory frequency, and yet all these things are not taught even as a basis in school at all. And I realized, I'm like, oh my God. The only thing that makes sense is that it is an enormous system of suppressing consciousness on every level. Because if you don't even know to define consciousness, if consciousness itself is defined in school as being just created by the brain as just an evolved ape, then we'll never go anywhere. We'll constantly always be at the same roadblock, because we'll almost not be able to define the very first step that we need to take.
Amazing. Well said.
I wanted to say, this battle over the access to higher consciousness, this has been going on from the very inception and the creation of these primitive workers that were described in the Atrahasis and in my book. I've spent time thinking as an engineer, how would you create a being to make sure it didn't revolt against masters again? And when I went through that analysis, that's why I was looking at the human antenna and delving into how could we be controlled. And then I realized we're a meat modem. And listen, that made me realize that these beings that designed us, no thought you've ever had, no feeling you've ever had, nothing you've ever experienced has not been recorded in probably their holographic telemetry system. And so they know more about you than you know. It is unbelievable. You're talking about the NSA snooping on you. You've never had a private thought. Think about that. Never, ever. And that, when you start realize that, and you think about the Santa Claus story and how there's some overseer watching whether you're good or bad, well, listen. I think in the hero story of us as these Homo sapiens that they designed as slaves to replace the Ajiji, part of our path was to be thrown in the dirt because they knew what they put in us to watch us rise as heroes. Look at our story. It is very heroic. Yeah, there's a lot of chaos and destruction. But the reality is the three of us wouldn't be sitting here if we hadn't discovered through all this morass and hidden stones what the truth is, and nodding our head that, yeah, we get it. We feel the same frequency. We're on the same level of consciousness, and it's not just an awareness. Consciousness has quantized levels that you can change based on your own personal conduct. This is the becoming part for you Christians out there who are listening. And it's the second part of John 1:12, okay? There's the receiving, and then there's the becoming, okay? The energy that he's talking about receiving is in your chakra system.
Right.
It's your kundalini energy that ends up in your coccyx bone. It's your ganglion of impar. Well, that's just the beginning. You have to release that and then allow it to overtake your whole antenna before you can actually be at a higher place in this game of consciousness. And this is not new knowledge. This has been known to the Hindu and the Indian civilization for a long time. Civilizations that are focused on higher consciousness, not on material gain. Okay?
Exactly.
Yeah, so the older ones are like that.
So guys, to flash forward to right now, we've talked about, who's in control. The Anunnaki are tuning us. We have all this stuff. We have Enlil, we have Marduk, we have, these various factions. What is the big picture right now moving forward on, July 6, 2016? Where is ultimately, Jerry go first, Matt finish. What's the end game?
The end game is a construct that they seem to have worked to, which they set their term limits in accordance with the zodiacal house, which they invented and gave to us in the Sumerian documents, okay? Right. And we know who did that. So they seem to trade zodiacal houses, and we're changing zodiacal houses right now. That means there's going to be a council change. And it's going to be a big one this time because it looks like it's going from one of the Anunnaki that wanted us decimated, pretty much kept us as dumbed down slaves, to one that, according to the records, wants us to have a golden age like they had on Atlantis. And it turns out that the god of Atlantis was none other than Poseidon, who turns out to be one of the chief deities of the Anunnaki Council, who was Enki, Ea Enki. Okay, so I believe his son is coming in to take over a council position of the Lord of the Earth. I think Marduk's holding it right now, and there's going to be a bloodbath in giving up the reins. So I think Marduk and Enlil have teamed up, taking the two most powerful countries in the world. Actually, well, apart from Russia, they've taken the United States and Europe, the European Union, and they're using them as a battering ram against Russia, China, India. And, so that's the alliance that's formed between these two factions, the Enkyites and the Enlilites. Right. So if you look closely, you'll see, I believe, they're playing both sides, okay? So there's no winner or loser here. The only beings this drama show is for is us. It's for us, okay? Think about the Greek drama plays that were put on by the gods to teach the people lessons. Well, now we've got HD TV and the internet and the big sports stadium. Those are our theatrical dissemination points for our lessons, okay? Or the bad lessons, like if you look at the halftime shows and the Super Bowl and this recent tunnel ceremony out of the Swiss. Listen, these are coming from the New World Order forces that are telling you what time it is and what's being done. And,
so for people scoring at home, you just said the NWO, the New World Order is Enlil and the United States, and Marduk, the European Union, against the other factions, which are China, Russia, and who else would you consider besides China and Russia? The Asian?
Well, you got the BRICS nations, but the real big one is probably China and Russia, and India is a close third. But look at the entities that are involved. We had the trident on the Ukrainian flag that just got wiped out. Okay, that was Enki's symbol. Okay, and then we used to have a symbol in Russia that were the symbols of Thoth himself.
Right.
That then got changed over to St. George and the Dragon. Okay, so this has to do with Ninurta. Okay, we left him out. He's one of Enlil's sons. So you got these Anunnaki factions infiltrating both sides. They all have their role to play in this big world stage, destroy the world's army, you know, just like the Armageddon, turn the swords into plowshares. And then as part of that, teaching the lessons to the humans, don't ever have this kind of war again, or you'll never be part of this galactic club that we're members of, right? So we're like the redheaded stepchild, be given a very vicious lessons and a culling, because I think the ascension window for those that are going to work closer with higher level forces is very small. Right. It's like you go back to the Garden of Eden when Enlil was telling him, no, you eat this plant and you'll die, and Enki goes, no, if you eat it, you'll have higher consciousness like us. How many positions on the Anunnaki Council were there? There were only 12. So what are you saying? You're going to give them highest consciousness so they can be like us? Where do you draw the line? That's always been the dilemma in this battle over evolution of consciousness.
So their end game. So you're saying, and Matt, jump in here in a second, but I want Jared to answer this. So you're saying right now the end game is a culling, a wipeout of us, and a start over, and so essentially they're going to be like, Enki, you can take over now. Go fuck yourself. We decimated our sapiens.
Well, this is the Matrix reload, right? You have Zion that broke away and was trying to be, you know, they're the ones that are awake, trying to not be part of the Matrix, right? And then you have everyone else that goes and gets reset with the Matrix, right? When it gets reloaded, all those simulation entities go away. So think about it like a vote.
Wow.
At the end of a zodiacal house, if you're venerating or this camp over here with Enlil and Marduk, guess what? When reload time comes, you're going with them. You've made your choice. Wow. So I think this is part of the ascension game, is choosing between light and dark. Matt, tell me if I'm wrong.
You're absolutely right. It's always been about that. And it's interesting that the esoteric Freemasons considered light and dark to be the same thing as red and blue also, because of how the vibratory frequencies work within humans. And that's amazing. I want to read a really quick quote I have right here. Gerald was talking about how it's simply a giant chess match with various wars being created and undergone between different factions between humans. And one of the things I have in my book here is Amschel Meyer Rothschild, which is Nathan's wife on her deathbed. And anybody who knows who looks into this story can directly connect the darker side of the Anunnaki, the Enlil side, the Marduk side, to this elite family called the Rothschilds, who have this ancient bloodline tradition that goes back thousands of years. But anyway, on her deathbed, before she was about to die, she said, and I quote, these words to somebody who wrote them down. It says, "If my sons did not want wars, there would be none." So basically, you're getting a piece of truth coming out of a very cocky person who basically doesn't care at that point, who is giving you a little piece of truth before they die, showing you that if you go back to all of these events that we think of were just these starting points for wars, we realize that they're just created wars based on culling humanity, having certain regions be moved over to other regions based on these warring factions between Enki and Enlil and Marduk. And so it's kind of staggering to realize, if we for a second realize that people have been exterminated by the billions over the last Shar, the last 3,600 years alone, just simply by this dark leadership period of fighting here. And we got to honor our veterans for the sacrifices they've made, but we got to stop to think for a moment on how insane this is and what we're doing.
Hey, as a veteran, I want to comment right there if I can.
Yes.
Is that okay? I was thinking about this. When will it stop? Well, think about this. Most of the major industrialized nations at points in time have experimented with the draft and also a volunteer army. So if you've got a volunteer army and you're still able to run ads and create economic conditions to drive people in it, it's not going to stop. It stops when people go, no, I don't care how much you pay me or what you're doing isn't right, and I'm not participating. That's when it stops,
There you
because
go.
till then it won't stop.
Well, listen, there's no coincidence that 3 weeks ago they enacted the women can now be drafted. I mean, that's not a coincidence. Was that you that pointed that out to me, or I forget who it was? But
It was-
Yeah, we're talking about it.
yeah,
I saw the ad too, yeah.
it's incredible. It's
Yeah.
literally incredible.
Cool.
All right, guys. Well, I mean, that was actually an hour and 3 minutes and sensational. We answered a lot of questions. Why don't we take a break?